Hey there, I'm Michael. Take a seat and I'm going to tell you about a little game called Ophidian 2360. Now, this is an expandable game, so you'll be buying box sets much like other card games out there. Think the LCGs, ECGs, it's that sort of model. And it is a deck construction game, as most of those are. I.e., the first thing you're going to do with this game is build your deck. Although, actually, first thing you're going to do is play it with the pre-constructed decks, because that's what everyone does with this kind of game, really. Get a bit of a feel of it, learn the game, and then really delve into making up your own strategies of how you actually want to go about doing the game, etc., with creating your deck. So, what is this game? Well, it is futuristic gladiatorial combat. You'll have your cards and you have your gladiators, and you're trying to eliminate your opponent. You'll be gaining cheer and victory points as you defeat their gladiators. Whoever has the most victory points after 4 waves will win, or if you manage to get to 12 victory points, you win, or 15 cheer, you win. You can also win by completely eliminating your opponent. But more than likely, if you've managed to do that, you would have hit 12 victory points first. But not necessarily, because you start with 4 gladiators totaling 10 victory points. But what happens is they level up over the course of the game, so they will become worth more victory points. So that's a brief summary of the game. The cards you have that you can play, there are quick hit cards that will do immediate damage or an immediate effect, and there are ones that you can beef your characters with. And then there are also little mini characters called minions. It's kind of your typical battling game that you would expect from the style of this, with a kind of futuristic sci-fi theme on there that varies depending on the deck you're playing with. So what do I think of it then? Well, we'll start with the artwork. That's always a good place to start. I mean, you can tell just looking at these 2 preset boxes here that the art can vary quite a lot in this game. But for the most part, it is really nice sci-fi artwork. There are a few cards not as good as others, but for the most part, it's nice, it's interesting. The whole graphic design is well done. Now, the one thing to mention here is that there is a lot of text on a lot of the cards. Now, some of the times that's just flavor text, but a lot of the time it is text you need to be aware of. And this is where this game becomes one that you kind of need to play a lot to learn the cards, so that you're not spending a lot of time reading it. And that is common with this style of game. So before I move on to more about the gameplay, let's take a step back and talk about components. Now, if you're just buying one of these little boxes here, that'll give you 2 decks of cards for dueling in, and you'll have cards here for marking your resources and your cheer, but you won't get any markers with that. You'll need to supply your own markers, and you'll need to use your own dice or some other form of marker for tracking damage on your gladiators. You also won't get these lovely mats, but you can buy these separate. You can also buy these pretty cool little rage tokens to help you know when one of your gladiators is raging. And raging is another aspect of this game. It's an interestingly thought out thing that a certain amount of damage will cause you to rage, and a certain amount of damage will cause you to die. Now, sometimes there's a big difference between those. You'll rage pretty early on. Sometimes they're really close. So it's much safer to kill that person, but it's going to take a lot longer to get there. Now, the advantage of raging is that it means you automatically damage your opponent, so it creates an interesting aspect to the game. Now, the majority of the game, as I've said, is made up of these cards, which they're fine. They're not really much to comment on component-wise. The big standout component of what I was sent was the player mats, which you can buy, so you can buy those, but they don't come with a base set. So what I'd suggest is kind of just buying 1 dual pack to kind of test the water with, and then you can buy more packs. I think there's a total of 6 decks available at the moment, so you'll be able to buy all of those and then do a bit more in the way of deck construction following that. And of course, being that kind of modular system, there will be more decks coming out in the future. So back to the gameplay then. As I said, there's the rage, which is an interesting different mechanic there, which is quite nice. But the key thing that makes this stand out to other like fighting card games where you've got people you're damaging, etc., is the momentum system. Now, most card games are broken down into you take a turn, I take a turn, or I use up my hand of cards and you use up your hand of cards, that sort of thing. This is very different. This whole momentum system, as long as you have the momentum, you keep acting. And every action you're doing, whether it's playing cards or doing something on a card that's already down, has a momentum effect. So it's either positive, meaning you keep momentum, or negative, meaning you lose momentum, or there are some where it depends on the card text, etc. So it creates this really interesting dynamic of being much more like a real gladiatorial fight, because it's not just trading blows, boom, boom, boom. It's right, I've got you on the ropes, I'm beating you down, I'm beating you down. Oh no, you've turned the table on me, which is really interesting. Or, I missed a step. Oh, you've taken over. You're now pushing me back. Creates this really ebbing flow to it that really is like a fight. If you watch like boxing, those sort of things, where it's not just trading blows. It's kind of a bit of back, a bit of forth, flowing this way, that way. And that is what this game does. So that's really interesting. Now, I don't think this kind of game is typically a game I would play very often. I think the key thing for me here is that it is a game, this style of game, as is common with like Netrunner and all the big, well-known, style of games like this, is that you need to know the cards. You need to plan out what you're going to do. You don't want to be sat there every turn, like reading walls of text. You want to know, all right, it's that card. That's come out. All right, and I'm waiting for that. And you get that by being kind of dedicated to the game. This isn't a game that you'll just pick up and play once a year. You want to be playing it fairly regularly. But it is a game that people who enjoy this style of game, who enjoy Netrunner, all those other kind of ones that end up with tournaments and competitions, will really enjoy this game. And it's got a lot of unique, interesting things going for it, especially with that momentum system. As I say, that is a really nice, innovative mechanic there that works fantastically well. So what about replay value? As I've said, actually it's an odd game in that you wouldn't play it very infrequently. You wouldn't play it not much at all. It's playing it a lot that you'll get the most out of it, and that it will become very chess-like. There's no randomness in this really, and that other than the card draw, and that's kind of typical. So it becomes a tactical battle between the people, and that brings me to my next point, which is the scaling. You see, you can play up to 4 players with this. And normally with this kind of card game, I would say, oh, well, it only really works with this many players or this many players. But actually, this works quite nicely at all the different player numbers. It does introduce an element of potential ganging up and kind of a meta game above the game that's very political and social and not really my style of game if you go above 2 players. But it does work a lot better than a lot of others. It doesn't feel as imbalanced as some tend to. So that's quite interesting there. Also, the pre-constructed decks seem reasonably well balanced for the most part on an overall play. Sometimes one will kick into the lead, others, it's normal with this kind of game really. So yeah, can 2 play this game? I would say, having said it plays a lot better than a lot of these kind of games at the 3 and 4 player mark, it is still at its best for my personal taste at 2 player with just the mental, right, I've focused on you, got to get momentum off you. I find that is what makes it best. And I think there's that momentum system really that makes this work better with multiple people than a lot of other games, because you're not just my turn, my turn, my turn, your turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. You've got to try and wait for the momentum to flow. And if you interrupt momentum, it's not necessarily you get the momentum. It'll go to the left, So it creates this interesting clockwork dynamic. Yeah, overall, not my style of game, but if you like these kind of collectible games with deck construction and fighting, sci-fi theme, I think you'll really enjoy Ophidian 2360 by Hack and Slash Games. Okay, so I do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do check out the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as subscribing and sharing the channel. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.